Hello everybody. So this is the video I was going to come out with on Wednesday. It is another one of my short stories. I've been wondering if I should keep doing the short stories or not. I do enjoy writing them and it's nice to share them with an audience. But I don't know if I should keep doing them and art history or if I should just focus on one or the other. So let me know what you think and let me know if you enjoyed the story. Here we go. This is called Black Tarn. It was nearing sunset, and the clouds had been dyed in hues of pink, orange, and red. The air carried the first chills of autumn, and the silence of the empty landscape was cut through with the rumble of a car as it snaked its way along the mountain road. It stopped abruptly, reversed, and slid into a lay-by. Gravel and sand crunched under the wheels, and some pigeons darted into the sky, startled by the sounds of the car's doors opening and closing. Dylan and Will retrieved their gear from the boot, while Andy spread a map over the bonnet of the car. "Just a short hike to the campsite," Andy called. "We'll be there before dark." "Brilliant. I need to stretch my legs," Will replied, coming to join him. "Then a sausage and a beer." Dylan hitched his pack to his back, adjusted the straps, and walked into the middle of the road. He looked ahead and behind. They might have been the only ones for miles. He snapped a picture on his phone and went to join the other two. Andy was folding the map and slipping it back into its waterproof sleeve, which was clipped to his belt along with a compass. Dylan smiled. They very rarely hiked outside of England, and often the trail was marked, but the map and compass came every time. Andy was also wearing the neon orange waterproof windbreaker with visor sewn into the hood to keep the rain off his glasses. His wife had bought it for him when they first started dating. Will, on the other hand, was wearing a band t-shirt with holes in the armpits and a black baseball cap. The three men peered into the trees and through the undergrowth, looking for the marker that would lead to the campsite. Will spotted it first, a thin pole with a hand-painted wooden sign, weathered to a grey, and in faded, peeling paint were the words "Black Tarn," with an arrow pointing along a narrow pathway that rose steadily through the pines. Dylan, Will, and Andy began the trek to the campsite. After an hour, the light was beginning to dim, and they came to a small stream where a mist was rising. "First stream of the trip," said Dylan excitedly, and he bent down, scooped a little of the water in his hand, and gulped it down. It was a kind of ritual he had when out hiking. He had developed it when he was on the trails as a boy. "A little sip of the water of the land to keep your spirit in step," his dad had said. He had not elaborated, and had died before Dylan had thought to ask more. Now he took a sip of the first stream as a nod to his father, who had gone too soon, but left Dylan with a love of nature, camping, hiking, and all other outdoor pursuits. Andy shook his head. When Dylan finished, they hopped over and retrieved their torches before continuing. "It really gets dark under these trees," said Andy, flashing his torch around looking for the path and the next marker. Dylan shivered a little and glanced up at the patches of sky he could see through the canopy. It was so much brighter up there. Crimson streaks shot through the indigo. "Red sky at night, shepherd's delight," said Will, clapping Dylan on the shoulder. "I think we're going to have some good weather for tomorrow's fishing." After some time they arrived at the top of a ridge, which led down a little way to a plateau. A few lights shone from the windows of an old farmstead. Behind this was a field with a surprising amount of tents. Dogs barked and there was laughter. Campfires glowed here and there. On the opposite side of the plateau was another tree-covered ridge. Dylan knew from looking at the map that at the top of the ridge sat Black Tarn, a rare high mountain fishing spot where there was rumoured to be a population of Arctic char. The three men approached the farmhouse. There was enough light to see by, but already the colours of day were starting to fade. The building was made of grey stone, cobbled and untidy. A short stone fence enclosed the house and a few outbuildings. The ground underfoot was dirt, and bits of rusty farm equipment lay here and there, small weeds curling up their metal tines. A man stepped out of one of the low-ceilinged sheds. He was wiping his hands on a dirty rag. He looked at them and smiled broadly. He had a missing tooth. Ah, the last party. I was starting to worry you wouldn't be coming, the man said, tucking his rag away and shuffling toward the farmhouse, beckoning Dylan, Andy, and Will to follow. He stopped at the house, where the top half of a stable door was open, leant inside, and pulled out a large book, which he laid on a disused oil drum. Names and emergency contacts, if you please, lads, he said, flicking the book open. Andy retrieved a pen from a side pocket in his pack and stepped forward to fill in the book. Now, we're not fancy here, said the man, but we have some rules. No open fires, keep the noise down after 11, and if you run out of anything, we don't got it, so don't come knocking on the house door. Once the book had been filled, the man led them out of the farmyard toward the field they had seen from the ridge. Pitchers are this way, he said, ablutions on the left. Here he indicated an old black wooden barn. A single bulb flickered above the door. They stepped over another small stream and into the field. Pitch where you want, the man began. Is that the route to the Tarn? Asked Will suddenly, pointing to a gap in the tree line. Yeah, the man replied. Good fishing most times, but mind yourself. The water is more treacherous than it looks, and there's caverns below, whole rivers running under our feet. It can suck you right down, never seen again. Has that ever happened? Asked Andy. Oh, sure, some years afore. Are there really Arctic char in there? Asked Will. Yeah, Andy scoffed. He had not been convinced that the Tarn held one of the rarest fish in the country. But the man paused. I think you'll find what lives in the Tarn surprising, he said eventually, then turned and made his way back to the farmhouse. Andy and Will debated the existence of the fish the whole time they searched for a pitch and put up tents. Dylan did not join the debate. He was uncharacteristically quiet. He felt a little ill, truth be told. His stomach had an unhappy, gurgly feeling, and his head felt fuzzy. He hoped that it had nothing to do with his water ritual. Andy often chided him for drinking untreated water, no matter how small the sip. When darkness finally came on fully, Will made up a fire in his portable fire pit, and they grilled sausages, eating them with some soft rolls and tomato sauce. Dylan managed to eat at least one. He still didn't feel quite right, but was determined to have a good time. Their camping trips were becoming fewer as the years went by. 10 years had passed since they had all worked together at the outdoor supply store, and he was glad that their friendship had survived the various push and pulls of life, of new jobs, schooling, marriages, and in the case of Will, the birth of children. Will and Dylan had even been joint best man at Andy's wedding. As their lives had each become fuller in turn, it left a little less space for weekends away camping. Andy pulled out one of his maps and examined it. Will was fiddling with his telescopic fishing rod. Dylan gazed around the campsite at the other tents, figures and faces half hidden in shadow and flickering firelight. Some had battery-operated lanterns, and some were quiet and dark already. Chatter and laughter floated up into the night. Dylan could see a dog curled up underneath the camping chair. Where did you say you heard about this place, Will? He asked. Some bloke was talking to old Reggie Chalmers at the Farmer's Arms. Said if we wanted a real challenge, a real rare catch, we should head up here, Will replied, squinting at his reel. This place isn't online, though, is it? Dylan said. Or any guide or forum I read when looking for bait advice, Andy chimed in. Then how did all these other people find it? And late October, no less, said Dylan. Will looked up at them, and then around the site. He shrugged. Don't worry, if we're up early enough, we'll find a good spot. He put his rod down and grabbed a beer from the cool box. We could have the only spot, and it won't make a difference if there's no fish up there, said Andy. Pass me one, will you? He said, indicating the beers. Will tossed a beer to Andy. He didn't catch it, and it landed heavily on the ground, breaking open and spraying them as it twisted round. The three men shared a laugh. Will offered Dylan a beer, but he shook his head. This caused his two friends to stop and peer at him. You okay, Dill? Asked Will. Yeah, you look a little green, said Andy. I told you not to drink from random streams. Nah, said Dylan, it's not that. I'll go splash some water on my face. And he waved them away. But Will reached out and put a hand on his forehead. You've got a fever, mate. Want me to come with? Nah, don't worry, Dylan replied. Here, take these. Andy had fished some pills out of his pocket. We'll come looking if you're not back soon." Dylan grabbed a torch and made his way down the path they had come by earlier. He glanced back at Will and Andy, who had seated themselves again and seemed to be deep in discussion, probably about the fish they'd catch tomorrow. There was bound to be pike and brown trout, not as big as ones you'd find in a river or lake, though. Behind their campsite, fog was creeping out from the tree line that covered the ridge en route to the Tarn. Dylan hurried to the ablutions barn. The bulb above the door seemed to have gone out, and when he entered and flicked the switch, the light sparked on, made a soft pop, and died. Dylan shone his torch around the room. It seemed to be all concrete and metal. He stumbled to the sink and turned on the tap. The water dribbled out. He wiped his forehead, and then, feeling his stomach clench, he rushed to a cubicle and heaved up his sausage roll in a bitter, watery rush. Then he leant his forehead on the cool rim of the toilet seat and closed his eyes. When he awoke, light was already coming through the slats in the wall. It wasn't quite sunlight, perhaps pre-dawn. Had he been here all night? He must have been. But had he slept or been unconscious? Why had Will and Andy not come for him? He seemed to recall a strange dream of flickering light and the sound of water dripping and then pouring. He stood and pulled the chain to flush the previous night's sick. He heard the sound of the piston rising and falling, but no water followed. He had no luck at the tap either. He still felt weak and feverish. So he figured he'd head back to the camp and take some of Andy's pills with beer if they had no water. Dylan left the ablution block. The sky was lightening to a dull grey. The drizzle felt good on his face, even as it began to soak through his clothes. It was quiet. No birds sang and no voices spoke. Dylan looked ahead to the campsite. It was empty. "What?" he said, stepping forward and staring ahead. The campsite was empty. Andy and Will were not there. No one was there. The tents were all gone. It was a bare patch of green, with only squares of flattened or yellowing grass to even suggest that there had been tents and people there the night before. Dylan looked behind him to the farmhouse, double-checking he hadn't somehow taken a wrong turn. He had not. He reached the entrance to the field and stood still, focused on the place where he and his friends had sat around the campfire, discussing fish and beer and sausages. Numb, he made his way over to their pitch. Some scorch marks remained from the fire. He spun round, taking in the landscape, looking back at the farmhouse. Its windows were like eyes staring back at him. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and he crouched down, his mind blank. Where was everyone?